Welcome to the Silicon Valley Agile Leadership Network. It's so good to see all of you. A couple of words of advice before we get started. This is going to be somewhat an interactive conversation with one another. So my encouragement to you is, if you're not at a table with other people, please close ranks, come on in, and enjoy it. There's a couple of seats up here. There's plenty of room. You're going to want to get close and tight for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have a microphone, so our guest speakers will be speaking as loud as they can, right? and if you can't hear, then we have some wonderful artists here who are going to do drawings. Pretty cool, right? Document today's session. So we're very excited to have you here. Who's first time here? A few of you. Okay, keep your hands up really high. If you've been here before, you see the first timers, please welcome them. There's some really courageous people here. Harrison was really cool. He's like, hey dude, it's my first time. And I'm like, all right. And I feel bad because I couldn't talk with them. So, but if you guys can like step in and have that conversation with these guys after our session, that'd be great. We're going to be going until 9 o'clock. We're going to have the first hour and a half. It's going to be with Ken and his crew. And then we'll have like a half hour to network and make sure you get your connections. Sound good? Fantastic. So my name is Stacy Louie. I'm an Agile coach based here in the Silicon Valley. I'm with Bratton. We've done a lot of coaching locally, but now we're doing a lot of stuff all over the place. So I haven't been here so often, so I apologize for those of you guys who I haven't seen so often, but I hope to connect with you here tonight. Every once in a while, the planets align, and you just never know what's going to happen. And it happened twice in this meetup, which I think you're going to really enjoy. So the first intersection, which is totally unplanned, happened. We have Dennis Britton and Monica Yap. Monica, if you guys stand up real quick. I'd like to introduce you to these two people. It's because of them that you're here tonight. It was through their discomfort of driving all the way up to San Francisco to have a meetup several years ago where they said, this sucks, we've got to have a meetup down here in Silicon Valley. So they set this up way long ago. So thank you for setting this up. It's always nice to have the founders around, and everybody's schedules are so busy, so it's good to see them here. The second intersection of craziness of all things is you think you invite someone to a party and they invite their friends, and you just never know how many friends it's like when the kids, when they're out and they're like, hey, let's just invite one person over, all of a sudden it's gone viral. It's all over Twitter, people like coming, and usually you're kind of like uncomfortable with that kind of thing, but tonight it's very comfortable. We've got Ken Power, who's been with Cisco. He's an Agilist here with Cisco. He's been here for a number of years, based in the UK. I have the...
Don't ever do that.
Boy, no.
Rushing right along.
So now I feel bad about putting this ridiculous picture of him in his breakfast. So now, have you guys seen that? Any guy.
There's a reasonable explanation behind that picture. If I could remember.
So before we get into introducing the rest of Ken's crew, his homies, I want to have a couple of quick announcements. Coming up, we have some really great meetups in addition to this one. Jürgen Appelo from Management 3.0, he was here maybe a year and a half ago. He's coming back, thanks to Carlos, who's helping organize that for us. And so we're really excited. Oh, there's the picture. You can't really see him, but he really is kind of dressed like
There really is a good explanation.
I wish I got a picture of his knees, because they're a little knobby. So we're really excited about Jürgen coming out, so I encourage you guys to take a look at that, and I hope you register for that. And in addition, we've got a couple of other events happening locally. So we've done Agile Camp for several years now, and here in Silicon Valley. And Any Agile Camp veterans? Yeah, woo! Awesome. A couple of speakers here too. Sinead spoke at the last one, so it's great. It's great to have you guys kind of really embrace that conference. We're doing it again this year in Silicon Valley. It's going to be held in I think October 28th. So it's come up on the screen. So October 28th. We are seeking speakers and sponsors. So if you're interested in speaking, there's a URL that you go to. It's really simple. tinyurl.com/AgileCamp. And there's a little form, you just fill it out. And if you want, you can speak here in Silicon Valley. But if you're interested in going somewhere else, we do have Agile Camp in Dallas. So it'll be our second time in Dallas. And we're actually launching out in New York this year as well. So New York City, full plan. We're really excited. New York City is going to be September 19th. And that's going to be the first one. So if you guys are interested, please sign up. We'd love to get your feedback. Fill out the form. It's really fast and simple. We'll send out another link where you can put some more details in. And then next week, who knows what's happening next week? Big deal next week for Agilists. Nobody knows. What's that?
San Diego? San Diego 1.
No, that's not next week. That's coming up. It's the Global Scrum Gathering. Is anybody going? Oh, well, I know isn't pulling you in. We have enough sun out here. We need more sun. So that's next week. But we do have a Lean Kanban conference coming out. The deadline for getting like I think they have like rooms set aside. The deadline's tomorrow for those rooms, but you can still sign up and register. I'm just trying to dig out a discount code for us too, and waiting for Janice, Linda, and Reed to get back to us. Hopefully we'll get a discount code here.
We have a speaker discount. We have a speaker discount.
Are you going to be speaking, Karl? Karl's going to be speaking, so you get to see him twice. You'll become good friends. But yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, no, we shouldn't do that. We don't want to slow it. Yeah. I'll call those things. I'll call. We'll sell it somewhere. All right. So anyway, so those are the things coming up. Any other events coming up that we want to announce?
So, housekeeping policies, no problem. We can tweet anything we want, right?
Open environment.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. You guys okay with that?
Film, video, anything like that? Okay.
I throw them on the next right.
Well, you know, one chin and only one chin.
We get Photoshopping.
Right.
Which size do we?
One of the things that we do like in Agile are visual cues. The one thing that we'll ask, because there's some noise in the back, it's a big room, 4 speakers. If you can't hear, would you kindly raise your hand and let us know? Okay, that would really help out the speakers. So with that, tonight's about Ken and his crew and his homies, whom I didn't realize they were coming until just this week. And it's like the multiplier effect. So we know who's a multiplier in this room just by Ken saying, hey, he volunteered his time. He also volunteered his friends to show up after work, late at night, to join the fun.
Thank you, Linda.
So I'll have maybe a quick introduction of the folks up here, and if you can jump in and help me out with introductions. We multiplied even more. It's just nonstop. It's like triples. Okay. If you know what a triple is, then I'll tell you later. Okay. So Ken Power, we introduced him. Diana Larsen. If you don't know Diana, and of course she's a co-author of several books. 2 of them are in my library. The one that I use all the time is Agile Retrospectives. So if you don't have Agile Retrospectives, you're missing out. I've got a copy in my bag, so if you guys want to know what it looks like, just come see me. I'll show you what the copy looks like. I might be tempted to auction it off as a giveaway today. Maybe, we'll see. It's my second copy, so I guess I don't need 2. But it's a great book. She has also co-authored other books with Ainsley Neese. Thank you. And she's a local. So it's nice to have Diane here. Last time I saw her, she was keynoting at an Agile conference. So we've got a great, powerful speaker here. We've got Tony Quinlan. Tony, you're from Cognitive Edge. And Tony's done a number of things in his career, and I think I'll have you go into that in more detail. But people are like, "Oh, Tony's here." I'm like, everybody knows Tony.
I have no idea. I paid about 5 people to say is Tony here.
And of course you have Karl Scotland now. Karl is known for being the founder of the Limited Whip Society. So if you're big into lean and Kanban sort of things, you might have heard of Karl's name from time to time. And then they brought with them two lovely ladies who are going to do the visual stuff. I just noticed that. So welcome. What were your names again? Karta?
I'm right.
Great to meet you.
And they have a company called Remarket.
Well, we'll keep that out. So let me know. Let's get that out. Did I miss anybody?
That guy behind you shaking his head.
Yes.
I'm Tom Williams, by the way. I play with these guys a little bit.
So with that said, before we launch into this, I had a big faux pas other than missing the whole Irish thing.
It's okay, we'll get that.
I learned there.
I'm sweating it out now. I have to thank Cisco and Carlos for setting this up. They've been really great partners over the last couple of months. They hosted, this is the second time in just a few months. So thank you for Cisco and the Cisco crew for helping set us up here at today's venue. That said, Ken, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Carlo, did you want to add anything or?
Well, you good? Well, the only thing I want to add actually to take this chance is to thank Scrum to make this thing available when the person of Ken here having a very, very busy week on something else and still available for us. So we round of applause for him because it took a lot of work to put this together.
Tom is my manager, by the way, in Cisco. So, so he gets the delight of working with me on a regular basis.
I like my friends from the UK.
Alrighty, okay, so hello everybody, and it's great to see such a big crowd here this evening. Thank you all for giving up your evenings to spend some time with us. Just as a quick show of hands, can you stand up if you work in Cisco? It looks like about 50-50. Okay. So I see a lot of familiar faces from within Cisco, obviously, and some familiar faces from outside Cisco. So when Carlo and Stacey first asked me to do this, I'm very happy to come along and spend some time with you guys. But then it hit me, we've got some friends in the area at the same time. It'd be really fun to do something together. So one area, well, we share many areas of interest together, but one particular area of interest we share tied in very nicely with the topic that I proposed for the talk this evening around problem-solving teams and applying principles from complexity science into helping us be more agile and lean organizations. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And let me just do a volume check. Can you guys hear me okay over there? Yeah.
Good.
At the end, you guys okay? Yeah, okay. Okay. There's not much I can do about the accent. I can try. You're one to talk. So. Yeah. Anybody else here from Ireland? Okay. Okay. No then. Okay. Okay. So we talk a lot about and share a lot of interest around the whole area of complexity science and how to make that more practical, particularly for leaders in organizations to help organizations be more agile, but also for lots of other roles, for engineers, for scrum masters, for product owners. How can we take these principles of complexity science and really apply them and make them useful for teams and organizations? So. Karl, for example, has been working for a while in the area of Cynefin and complexity science. Tony comes from the company that created the Cynefin framework, and you can see a picture of it just over here, the Cynefin framework, not the company, but just to be fair. And Diana and I are, we have some kind of common connections with the human systems dynamics community. We're familiar with that. So all of these things are really useful in applying problem solving and tools that are practical in helping with that sort of thing. Before we get too deeply into it, do you guys want to say anything to build on the introductions from earlier?
I'm happy to be from the UK.
Yeah, well,
But not England.
yeah.
Just to be clear, not England.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And I don't hold it against them. So
I'm not going to go on the other side of the
that's okay. So there's lots of different categories of problems that we are trying to sort. We often hear about the notion of removing impediments or solving problems within teams, whether you happen to be Scrum or some other framework. The notion of removing impediments or removing obstacles is a pretty common thing. And a good one. So let me see. You see what you draw.
I'll cross the ocean. Yeah.
So I don't want Kata and Marty to develop any sort of inferiority complex from what I'm about to draw, so I'll keep it. They're basically, when we think about what agility means to us as an organization, and what sort of problems we're trying to solve, we try. And when I say we, I'm speaking from the perspective of our team, Tom's team, the team that we work with within Cisco, which by the way is a vendor organization for anybody that's not familiar with and so in the service provider space, cloud and virtualization service provider video and that whole space. So it's about 7,000 or 8,000 people scattered across the globe. So it's a fairly big organization, globally distributed, with all of the usual challenges that go with that sort of organization. So just thinking about what our goals are for an organization and from a transformation perspective, we tend to bring along two fairly basic questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a mic
Competing
there.
with dishwashers, it's a tough.
Yeah, there is a mic. Yeah, grab the mic and switch on and switch
Yeah. There are chairs up here as well. Let me try this. Is this better? Okay, excellent. Okay. Hold it up close. Okay. This is going to impede my drawing ability, so now I can play this. So, probably most people are familiar with the analogy of, when we talk about flow, flow of work through teams and organizations, probably most people have heard the analogy about freeways or motorways. And when we think about motorways and motorways at capacity, we know that a motorway at capacity is effectively a parking lot. There's not much getting through. Okay, so if you think about your journey home this evening, and there happen to be two parallel lanes. Let's pretend each one of these represents a vehicle of some sort. And I'll turn this around for you guys to see in just a second. If the flow of left, and we'll call this right. Okay, so you guys see this okay? Okay, so we got two sets of lanes, one flowing this way, one flowing this way. Simple question, but which of those two sides would you rather be in on your journey home this evening? The one on the left or the one on the right? The blue or the red?
It depends on which way home is.
Thank you. Okay. On your journey home, would you rather it looks like the one on the left or the one on the right, the blue or the red? Thank you. The red, yeah. Well, me too. Anybody prefer to be in a traffic situation like the one on the right?
Oh, I love it.
Sorry, the one on the left, the blue one? What's that?
I love it 2 hour commute.
Yeah. You get to catch up on music, listen to the radio.
Depends on the audiobook, right?
Depends on the audiobook. Okay, yeah. Okay. If there's somewhere you need to be in a hurry for some reason, you probably want to be in the red lane.
Depends if you're in a Google car or not.
This is true too. So lots of factors come into play. Okay. Okay. So generally when we look at this, we can intuitively recognize that the blue lanes here are pretty much full to capacity. If we add more blue cars, we're not going to increase the throughput. We're not going to get to our destination much faster. So if getting to our destination in a timely manner is important to us, if getting there in a predictably timely way is important to us, we're probably going to prefer a situation like the red. Okay? Make sense? Do we have any program managers or project managers in the room? And I know we do. I see a couple of them over there. Okay? So I know what you guys are thinking. You're looking at the blue lane and you're saying, hang on, we can get another car in there. There's some space here. Okay? We could get 0.5 of a vehicle over here. Okay. We're not using that to its full efficiency. Okay? We've still got some capacity we could squeeze out of that. Okay. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of organizations approach trying to implement a process that thinks about how to maximize the utilization of, in this case, cars, but in our case, people or equipment or something else. But we know that, from queuing theory and from other sources, that the more we pile into this queue on the blue side here, the slower it's going to go, the less predictable our throughput time is going to be. The worse things are going to be in general. Also, we don't want just 2 cars on the motorway here. That's not going to be terribly efficient. So there comes a balance where we need to look at, well, what's the most efficient load for the capacity that we've got available. So we think of throughput in terms of how many things are passing through our system in a given time. That could be features per month, it could be user stories per sprint, however, whatever throughput needs to be. But we look at it in terms of number of things flowing through the system in a given period of time. So when thinking about our transformation, we think about, well, how can we improve the flow of work through the organization? How can we improve the flow of stuff so that we're getting value to our customers more quickly? Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so that's question 1. And question 2 then is, well, what's impeding that flow of work? What impediments are there to things flowing smoothly? And it could be overutilization, or it could be something else. And we'll talk about those something else's in a little bit. Okay. But the 2 questions to keep in mind throughout all of this, why are we talking about complexity or problem solving? It's really to improve the flow of value through the organization so that things happen in a more predictable and reliable way, and we've got high quality and happy customers, all of that sort of stuff. Okay? Any questions on any of that? Okay. So let's think about impediments or problems that we might have to solve in our organizations. So for these sorts of problems that we're going to talk about, and we'll go through a number of different tools. And one thing, I was really delighted when the guys were available and agreed to come along, because we each bring some different perspectives and tools to this. So you'll hear a lot more from the guys in a few minutes. So we'll work through some different tools and approaches with you guys. But think about the types of problems or impediments that your teams might face, where they can, it's a problem, but the power to solve that problem is pretty obvious, pretty straightforward, and it just requires some work to go do it. Or either as an individual or within the scope of a Scrum team, for example. We know what the problem is, we can just go solve it. You all familiar with that sort of scenario? So the type of problems that we're going to be talking about here are more at the organization level or the cross-team level. Very often there are problems that we need to solve where it takes more than just the wisdom of a single team to solve that problem, or the nature of the problem is such that it really requires a cross-organization focus or a cross-organization approach to solve. Otherwise we end up solving the same problem over and over again within different teams, and it keeps coming back. Anybody ever see that sort of situation? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's the situation that we're coming from. What complicates that is there's often geographic distribution involved, large organizations, multiple teams, multiple perspectives on what the problem actually is that we need to solve. So the implications of that are, very often the problem remains either unsolved or we end up fixing symptoms. We end up fixing what we can control within the scope of our own domain. The challenge with that is we don't really solve the problem. So what we're going to be showing you this evening is some tools, as I said, from complexity science that we can use to analyze those problems and approach them in a different way than maybe we're used to approaching them. So there are some very useful tools that we can take from complexity science and apply them in the context of our teams and organizations. So our call to action for you guys for this evening is to join in with us. We'll talk about some specific problems in a few minutes and get you working through some of these tools so that you get some practice with them. We have no PowerPoint slides for this evening. This will all be discussion and using the stuff and interaction, and we have time afterwards for some Q&A as well. We'd be happy to send you some links to further reading material if you're interested afterwards. But for this evening, our call to action is just get involved, jump in, start using the stuff with us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions around how to use the stuff. Some of the benefits that we get from this in our organization, it increases the problem-solving capability of teams. We hear a lot about autonomy and self-organization in agile organizations, and those are words that are easy to throw around, but the depth behind them is very often missing. Emergence is another word you often hear. But self-organization, emergence, those sorts of things, they're really characteristics of complex adaptive systems, which is another reason we're bringing tools from complexity science into what we're talking about here. And also, they're good tools for developing the leadership capabilities of people. A lot of the types of problems that we're going to be talking about are cross-organizational in nature. So they require people to develop their skills in working across the organization rather than just within their immediate team. So good for relationship building, good for organization navigation. And the third benefit I'll talk about, the term anti-fragility has become very popular lately. Have you guys come across the Anti-Fragile book? Nicholas Karl, exactly. Yeah. Well worth reading if you can get your hands on it. Very entertaining book, very good, interesting book. But then the concept of anti-fragility is not that when we face a problem, not that or a challenge, it's not just that we can solve it and rebound, but that actually encountering a difficulty actually makes us stronger. We come out, not just more resilient, but stronger as a result of having encountered the difficulty or the problem. And a lot of the approaches that we take with trying to solve problems in the complex adaptive space and the tools that we talk about can actually make us stronger as a team or as an organization as a result of the challenges that we're facing. So some benefits to keep in mind as we go through this sort of stuff. Okay, so questions before we move on? So you're all at tables, or most of you are at tables. For those of you not at tables, either free to stay where you are or welcome to join the table. But what we'd like you to do is think just form groups at your table. You've got post-it notes, you've got Sharpies. Talk for a few minutes. We'll give it a time box of, I think, 6 minutes. And what we'd like you to do is at your tables come up with at least 3 examples of really hairy, tough problems that are not the kind of problems you can easily solve on your own or even within a Scrum team. The sort of problems that are bigger than an individual Scrum team. Does that make sense? Okay, we'll hear back with some examples. But so please, if you're on your own, please just feel free to join in with some other people. Yeah. Okay, so time box of 6 minutes, so we'll check in.
We need to go over think some type of problems are maybe problems.
Other things going on.
Concerned about data.
You're Switzerland.
Even if you've got a bunch of What are they saying? No.
So that was 6 minutes. Wherever you are is just perfect. Okay, so let's hear some examples from some tables. We'll be using these stickies with some exercises that we're going to carry on with in a few minutes. So let's hear a couple of examples. So I saw 1, 2, and then 3.
So we have your cross-functional teams that using different methodologies.
Yeah.
And this is a big problem. Just, that's not using, just Kanban, Scrum, also speed along the line.
Yeah.
Then,
So I'll just take one example for now. We'll do a couple. So the example here was cross multiple teams using different methodologies. Yeah. And tools. Yeah.
Lack of agreement around features and product requirements.
Lack of agreement around features and product requirements.
Disconnected leadership to some degree. They need to be trained, committed, and involved.
The disconnected leadership, to some degree, they need to be trained, committed, and involved.
Agile fence sitters, they see the value, but they do not support in their org, like senior management.
Yeah. Okay. They see the value, but they're not supporting their organization.
Right.
Yeah.
How to get all team members on a Scrum team to be equally productive and to pull their weight.
Yeah. So having all team members on the Scrum team be equally productive and pull their weight.
Yes.
Oops. Great.
Sales team that's looking for a 18-month roadmap.
Okay. So sales team that's looking for a 12 to 18 month roadmap. Okay.
Yeah, the requirements which are spread across multiple teams and accountability of the delivery of those.
Yeah. Accountability spread across multiple teams. Yeah.
So choosing where to invest in which products and services across the organization.
So choosing where to invest in which products and services across the organization.
Well, I don't get the problem with that. What's the problem? Where's the problem?
It's not a solution that generated by one person. That was the scenario
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about, right?
Or deciding how much to invest in each area.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're not deciding. So I'm still not getting it.
It's not solvable by the Scrum. You can't, with a Scrum team, you can't solve the problem of how much you're investing.
So that decision hasn't been made before the Scrum team has to looking for it?
Well, so let's look at the problem as described, and we'll so we can catch up with it. But the problem as you've described it is, one more time. It's deciding which products and services to invest in, and maybe what percentage of your investment budget to invest in each of those different areas. Yeah. Okay. Let's go with one more.
Software turnover stops when build breaks.
One more time.
Software development stops when the build breaks.
Okay, software development stops and the build breaks. Okay, and in larger teams, larger organizations, that impacts a lot of people, and a lot of productivity. Okay, so look at the stickies that you've got. So hold on to those problems. We're going to be doing some work with those as we go through some more examples. And Tony's going to talk to us about some ideas from the Quinlan framework around how to deal with these problems.
Quick show of hands. How many of you come across a guy called Dave Snowden? Okay. Who would say, no, I don't know. So Dave Snowden is a guy from Cognitive Edge. He's becoming quite well, he's speaking a lot at the Agile conferences, and I just wondered if people knew. So some of you may have come across the framework I'm going to show you before. A smaller number may actually know how to pronounce what it's called. It's always part of the game. to give you a warning, okay? The stuff I'm going to talk about now, I'm going to do it at some speed. We do a 4-day course to teach people about this. For the really smart ones, we do 2 days. Okay, I was recently in Turkey talking to the generals in the military there. They had 2 hours. Okay, you guys are that good. You're going to get about 15 minutes. Brace yourselves. Brace yourselves. Okay. So we call this the Cynefin framework. Cynefin is a Welsh word. That's where our gentleman, Mr. Snowden, comes from. And if you ever call it English, be prepared for a worse barrage than we just saw. Okay. So the Cynefin framework is how we look at problems, how we look and perceive the world. Okay? So it's a really simple framework. We have 5 domains here. 5 ways of looking at problems, 5 kinds of things we tend to see. So in this space down here, we have what we call the obvious world. In this world, cause and effect, self-evident everywhere. Okay? If I let go of this pen, what happens? Goes up. Thank you. There's always one. So, cause and effect, self-evident everybody. In this world, we put in place processes, rigid constraints. Constraints matter in this place. There's only a certain number of things that are likely to happen. So, in this world, what do we do about these things? We sense what's going on, we categorize it. Oh, I recognize those. It's the idiot at the front who doesn't know how to hold onto a pen. Okay? And we respond saying, don't drop the pen, idiot. Okay? Really straightforward. So in this world, we sense, we categorize, and we respond. So there is order here. It repeats the same way. It is predictable. Where I'm doing it doesn't matter. If I drop the pen in Australia, it has roughly the same effect if I drop it here or if I drop it in Dublin. Okay? Place doesn't matter. Who I am doesn't matter. Then you've got the world up here. This domain we call the domain of complication. In this world, there is cause, there is effect. But they're usually separated by now because we've got process or time or space or things happening. Small differences at the beginning of that process, they get ironed out as you go through. Manufacturing is a good example. I used to work for IBM on the manufacturing side. You know, if somebody gave me the hard drive and it was the wrong way around, the process kind of ironed that out and still went into the PC. It worked. This was back when IBM built PCs, clearly. In this world, we have order, but we might need somebody who really understands the process to be able to see it. We might need an expert. We might need somebody to do some heavyweight research, but it is still predictable. If I get to the beginning of an issue and I wonder what I'm going to do, if I go to the right expert, they will tell me with confidence what the outcome will be. We know what's going to happen. It repeats the same way every time. There is no doubt in this world. There is just the need for big brains. So in this world, what we do is we sense what's going on, we analyze, and we respond. And it might not be us who do the analysis, we might need to bring somebody in who's a specific expert. Now, that's the world we tended to grow up in most organizations. But however, we've got 3 other domains here now which we recognize. So we've got the domain of the chaotic. Cause and effect, frankly, who knows? So some of the people I've been training for the last 2 days have learned that my language occasionally slips, but on occasion I managed to catch it. That was one of those few occasions. In the world of the chaotic, there are no constraints. Everything is happening around it. It's like a box of gas. If you ignore the fact you've got the box, the gas is pinging around all over the place, right? If you have a party of 6-year-olds and you just fed them Coca-Cola and sugar, stand back. Okay. In this world, there is no pattern, there is no order. In this world, what we have to do, you can't step back and observe it and decide what to do too carefully. You've got to get in there and create some stability. Okay. Over here, I can afford to stand back and watch, analyze without engaging. Over here, I can't do that. In this world, I've got to act to create some stability. Then I can sense what's happened as a result of my action, and then I can respond in terms of what do we do now. Okay. In there, we're looking for stability. When we get to this world up here, now at this point I'm going to introduce a word that In normal English, we tend to associate these two together, so complex. Many people, complex, complicated are interchangeable, right? I'm using them with very specific uses. Complicated says there's order, but there's a whole lot of pieces to that. An engineering metaphor. Complex says there is so much going on here. There are feedback loops, which means if I do certain things, I'm constrained in what I do, but my actions might change those constraints, which will change what somebody else does, and they'll change the constraints that are back on me. So there's all of these things happening in feedback loops, which means that things never quite repeat. Things evolve the whole time. So what's going on? We talk about constraints and agents, and the system evolves. And you can never go backwards in it. In the complicated world, for instance, if I'm a Boeing engineer fixing a plane, and if I screw something up and I realize, actually, I got that wrong, I can undo it and go back. In a complex environment, if I take an action, the system evolves, I don't get any do-backs. Okay? This works really well with human beings. I had 2 teenage daughters. I'm now realizing there were certain things about 3 years ago, I really wish I had a do-back on that one. I'd like to just revert, can we just switch that whole thing about letting you have technology in your bedrooms? That was a really bad move. I don't get to revisit that. The system has evolved. In this world, we talk about enabling constraints. You can introduce some constraints, but they are going to generate new behaviors, new things developing out of your system. And in these two spaces, it matters who you are and how you see the world. My perception, my perspective, my technical background will sway me on that. So 2 people looking at the same problem, one will see it as complicated, one will see it as complex. And even in the same situation, you find multiple elements of all of these. So let me give you one example. Anybody here recently had a kitchen done? A new kitchen put in or designed? Excellent, you have my sympathies. There are certain elements in a kitchen which are obvious, to my mind at least, okay? I have a dishwasher, I'm going to have the cupboard that the crockery goes in pretty close by. So unloading is an easy task. Okay? In the UK, I'd say you put the draining board next to the sink, but I'm conscious that not everybody knows what a draining board is, so we'll move on from that. However, there are certain things in the kitchen, like plumbing and electrics. There is a right answer to those things, but do you know what? I'm not going to be the one to do it. I'm going to get the expert in for that. And they will be able to do it. So, that's great for complicated. In the complex world, what goes in what cupboards? Is there a right answer?
Why?
That's the simple answer. I'm all for that one. Although, as I'm about to discover, because I go back to the UK later this week, and next week my in-laws arrive for 2 weeks. Once they've left, there will be a 3-week period where every member of the household is going, has anybody seen where the hell this is? Because everybody will have their own personal version of where it goes. This is a complex. And in complexity, you have to do things differently. If you have a complex problem you're trying to resolve, you can't predict it. You can't sit back and analyze it, because while you analyze it, it moves forward. One of the ones that I'm having a conversation at the moment with is radicalization of young people online. Okay. Do you know what? There are professors who are going, funders for the next year will give you a solution to what's going on right now. Brilliant. So in a year's time, I have the answer to an outdated problem, because do you know what? All those sites they're going to will be dead, they'll have moved on. Actually, they'll have moved online into apps and everything else. So in this world, you have to start, we call it probe-centered response. You run safe to fail experiments that help you learn about the system and help you develop what's going on. You cannot predict it. You do, however, have one big threat in this place, which is called retrospective coherence. And I'm about to stop, I promise. Ken knows I talk way too much. Retrospective coherence is when you have a boss who looks at what happened in a complex system and they go, that was a mistake. So, what happens next? We'll do a review of what happened, and you go, that's the moment we should have stopped it. And that's usually when you put in a process to make sure that never repeats. Right? It was never going to repeat anyway, right? It was always going to happen differently, but in the meantime, you just added some bureaucracy to the system. A slightly sensitive one, I recognize, but you'll all understand this one. So the Twin Towers attack way back, congressional report comes out. They've developed retrospective coherence. They're looking at a complex system, looking for the root cause. So the report comes out and says, we need to put in place a process. Anybody who is learning to fly, but is not really paying attention when they do the bit about landing, we should arrest them early. And then they put in place a process to monitor that. Okay? Really? Is that ever how that's going to happen again? No. So part of the problem with complex problems is you look back on them, you see what happened, and you assume. You've got to take a different approach. Okay. So we talk about rigid constraints down here. There's only a certain number of things that you are allowed to do. We talk up here, governing constraints. There are a whole lot of things you're not allowed to do, but within those you've got some space to act. And in this world, we talk about enabling constraints, putting in some constraints for behavior and issues to be able to come out that will evolve the system forward in positive ways, where you take small actions, not big planning ones. Is that okay? It's a very seductive wing.
I'm glad you think so. Excellent. So, I'm just thinking of time, and not because of totally waffling or anything, but which was very entertaining. No, thank you, Joe. That's excellent. What we would normally do, given a little bit more time, is you see there's a poster over here of the Kinetic framework. And what we would normally do at this point, if you were a team that I was working with, we'd get the post-it notes that you had from the first part of the exercise and do what we call a domain mapping exercise. Figure out which of those domains that Tony just described each of those problems fits into. And because of the constraints I gave you at the start about it should be a big hairy problem, one that's tough to solve, it's more than likely going to fall into either the complex or the complicated domain. Very unlikely, at least from the examples that we heard earlier, very unlikely that those would fall into either the obvious domain, and I don't think we heard anything that falls into the chaos domain either. Just looking at the problems that you identified earlier, we won't go into a whole lot of detail, but can you at least relate some of those problems to the definitions Tony gave us and the descriptions of the complex versus complicated domains? So does that make sense? We're not going to do another exercise on this right now. We'll go to build on this in a moment. Okay, question?
Did you say 5 domains?
Thank you. There is a fifth domain in the middle. Quite right. So there's two pieces which I would be crucified for. So I will do this in seconds, I promise. In the middle, we've got a place called disorder. Basically, that's the domain of, I don't know enough information about this problem yet to work out where it sits within the whole piece. Okay. There is one other thing, thank you, which I forgot to mention. The boundaries between these domains, it's useful to know when you're kind of crossing it in that space, but it's kind of permeable, it doesn't matter too much. Down the bottom, you've got a real problem on your hands. This boundary here, between obvious and chaotic, we call it the cliff of catastrophe. If you've ended up saying things are obvious, we'll put in place a best practice, and you don't notice that the world around you is changing, the context in which you're working has shifted, and you start moving to this, and you tip over that boundary, it's not pretty. If you do it accidentally, it's a disaster, it's a crisis, and usually most people's first reaction is reimpose order, reimpose the rules. You know, they weren't following the rules, we'll enforce them harder. The rules will put you in that place in the first time. It will get worse before it gets better. However, you can, on occasion, take people into chaos deliberately to disrupt entrained patterns and experts who have become too focused on, I know all the answers. If you need them to innovate, and they're not innovating properly, you take what we call a shallow dive into chaos, which is fun to watch, brilliant to facilitate. It's not the most comfortable place to be when you're on the receiving end, but it's effective.
Can you use an example of moving from obvious to chaotic?
Yeah. So everybody know about, in the UK, a couple of years ago, we had phone hacking by journalists, News International.
Yeah.
So the deal with that was News International hacked loads of phones for years. They had a best practice process. Any celebrity comes and says, you've hacked into my voicemail, and they go, have some cash. sign this contract, we'll never speak of this again. Most people went away no problem. What they didn't notice was people starting to get a bit fed up and the world around you is changing. Until you have one person come in and go, you've hacked my voicemail. Have some cash. Sign this contract, we'll never speak of this again. No. You can imagine their lawyers going, no information on this response. What the hell do we do now? The first thing we'll do is up the ante, reinforce the rules harder, have more cash. So, no, not going to play. And at that point, you're landing over in here. A lot of organizations have been through that. So call centers tend to go for best practice. Call centers go for a script. You know, the first thing we'll do is try and map your problem onto my script, and I'll come up with my solution. Anyone get really fed up when they're calling in? Because do you know what? Mine was slightly different than that. You know, security, you think about Sony the other year when their credit cards got hacked. They had best practice. They had a very simple, obvious response to everything. It no longer applied. You end up over here in chaos. Does that help?
Yeah, I was thinking about when SAP stole Oracle software. And the fact is they went from being obvious to in trouble.
You see it on the grand scale, you also see it on the micro scale in so many places. We've all known managers who've got a certain way of doing things, and at some point it really breaks. It never breaks easily or simply, it's catastrophic.
So let's try and ground some of this actually. Let's look at the problems that you identified earlier and try and pick one that falls into the complicated domain and one that falls into the complex domain. And a quick maybe guideline, and Tony, you can add to this if I miss anything. But for the complicated problems, you're really thinking of where subject matter experts would help. We need to do some research. We know there are multiple possible things we could do to solve the problem. We just need to go and find the right approach, and some research or consulting some subject matter experts will help us. Okay, does that help as a guideline? Okay. And for the complex domain, or the complex problem that you're facing, there are no subject matter experts necessarily that can directly solve that problem. We need to do some experiments. We need to acquire more knowledge or more information. So we need to take some small steps. We know roughly what the goal is, but we don't know exactly how to get there. So we're going to take a small step, an experiment, or we're going to get some feedback, and then we're going to do another experiment that might take us in this direction. All the while we're kind of moving towards the solution, but through a series of small experiments.
Very often we've had the experts in, and we did what they said, and then the problem didn't go away, and then we had the other experts in, and we did what they said, and the problem didn't go away. Then you know you're moving complex.
Those are good indicators that, that you're facing a complex problem rather than a complicated problem. Okay, so just try and pick one of each, one complicated, one complex, and let's use the poster that's over here. Just do that, just to try and make it clear. So if you've got a complex problem, just come and stick it on the column, or sorry, the domain here. If you've got a complicated problem, stick it in this domain. Let's take 2 minutes for this.
Maybe I think it works, but if everyone agrees, the problem is the same problem, but it may be complex. It could be either way.
Well, I would say because if you don't think you know, they can always
Well, that's why I think it's primarily complicated. That's where but there's, I can imagine instances where you bring experts in and never get solved. Now this is coordination. Whoever works on it, remember, every time you have to do
To some extent, it's evolved. So not only is it grounded in the
About 30 seconds. So if you've got some more that you want to add to the poster here, please get them up now. We'll go to the next section.
People like Google, stuff gets delivered all the time. There's no human intervention. It's barely over time. Well, so I think you can.
different than.
Absolutely. I would think that's
one way or another.
So wherever you are is just fine. But we'll build on what we're doing so far with the complicated and complex problems. Karl is going to take us through some strategies for dealing with these.
So, when you talk about the main difference between complicated and complex. So complicated is just the idea that an expert knows the answer, they can give you the answer, and then you can go off and do that. So to me, this is usually associated with manufacturing, as Tony said. And maybe you can think about this as scientific management, tailoristic approach to management, where the manager knows best, the manager puts together a solution, and the workers all go off and work that way. There's another approach, think about that with scientific management, that we can use here called strategy deployment. So for me, some of the tools that Quinlan brings are forms of strategy deployment. And I describe that as any approach where solutions to the problem emerge from the people closest to the problem. So here we had a nice defined problem, how to build a car quickly. Taylor could, managers put together the workflow, tell the workers what to do, in what order, in what time, and we could do that. Toyota started manufacturing cars. They had a different problem. They were in a different space. So what they said was, well, let's put some strategies in place and allow our workers to figure out how to solve those problems themselves. So rather than giving people instructions in the plan and saying follow them, they said, here's some enabling constraints. So strategy is enabling constraints, and we allow people to be creative as to how to solve the problems within those constraints. So we're going to go through, within that context, what strategy deployment is. There's a framework called the X Matrix, which I like is a nice way of thinking about how can we piece all this together, how can we visualize it, so that we can see what problem we're solving, what are the strategies, how we know whether it's being solved, what results are we trying to achieve. So typically you do this on a single piece of paper. It's nice to do it on an A3 piece of paper, which means it's easy to communicate, it's easy to visualize, it's easy to have a conversation around.
So for us Americans, it's like 11 by 17 or something like that.
Yeah, that by 7.
It's
17.
probably
Yeah.
twice the letter size.
Two letters.
Yeah.
Why so short?
What happens typically with the A3s is everyone tries to do it on 8.5 by 11s here. That's what I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's twice a standard letter. So we take a piece of paper and we divide it into 9 sections. And there's a middle, nice big X on it. That's really it. So we're going to start off, first off, we've got a problem. We're going to try and talk about what results do we want to achieve. We have a problem, what results is this problem stopping us achieving? If we solve this problem, what results can we achieve? And the higher level you can do this, the better. So if we're talking about organisational problems, why often we're talking about organisational results? So we might start off with a problem, and we can go through a 5 whys type exercise of getting down to the root condition and say, what's this problem trying to solve? So I was trying to think through. We had an example about prioritising features. We have a problem with prioritising features. What results do we want? Well, we want clearer features. Do we know what features we want to build? Why do we want to know what features we want to build? We want to know what features we want to build so that we've got a great product. Well, why do we want a great product? Oh, because we want to sell more product. Why do we want to sell more product? Because we want to make more money. So typically it comes down to the money. Thank you. Well, this one, does that make any difference?
Break that up. Both of them, yeah, both of them all the way up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Other way, clockwise.
6.
There you go.
7.
Switch, switch.
Oh, yeah.
I'll turn this on.
That was quite a complicated problem.
That was probably obvious. I'm just stupid. That's why they call it obvious now. So we're trying to get some results, and typically these are business results, and we can think about these in terms of typically revenue. We're trying to get some revenue in some way, more unit sales, more customers, or maybe we're trying to reduce some cost in some way. Or the other way I quite often find is there's some quality problem. But there's some really big, high-level problem that we're trying to solve, and there's a number of layers of detail, but if we can figure out this, then we're all just trying to solve the same problem. And there might be multiple problems that are trying to cause this. So this isn't going to be necessarily neat. In order to solve this problem, where we don't know what the solution is, we want to put some strategies in place. So here we put strategies. So these are our enabling constraints. They want to be enabling constraints rather than governing constraints. Governing constraints too tight don't allow you to be creative. When we're talking about Agile specifically, I actually think Agility, the Agile Manifesto, was a nice set of strategies. So we could come up with some Agile strategies like, let's focus on individuals, I can't spell this way up, and interactions. Maybe let's have a strategy around focusing on working software. Maybe have a strategy around responding to change. Anybody think of a 4th one? Give me a 4th strategy. Let's try customer collaboration. I'm not saying use these strategies, I'm just trying to come up with some really nice generic ones. But these don't tell us what to do, but they give us some guidance around when we're trying to figure out how to solve the problem. We want to be doing it in a way which is focused on customer collaboration, allows us to respond to change, maybe helps us deliver more working software more frequently, focuses on teams and interaction between those teams. Down in this corner here, we get a little matrix. So this is our first matrix. And we can have a conversation around how does focusing on individual and interactions help us with revenue or reducing cost or quality? Well, we can certainly say that we think there's a strong correlation there. And working software is probably going to help us with revenue, and responding to change maybe helps us reduce cost. Customer collaboration, I think that'll be quality and revenue. So we can start getting these correlations here about how does our strategy help us meet our results? Then on this side, we can start thinking about some outcomes. So what are the intermediate states that are going to tell us, give us some indication that the strategies are working and we're getting towards these results. These are results of trailing metrics. We either get the results or we don't. If we don't get them, it's probably too late. But there's some intermediate outcomes we can identify that will probably give us some idea about whether we're on track. So I'm just going to make, so let's say we think if we can increase throughput, that might be a useful outcome. I'll just come up with 3. Maybe lead time is another one I like. Improving lead time, maybe number of defects. And we can do another grid here, another matrix of throughput. If we're delivering more, that's going to help us with revenue. Delivering quicker, that's lead time. Number of defects is probably cost and quality. So there's some correlations there that we can talk about. And then the last thing is, I'm going to call it tactics. What are we actually going to do to solve the problem? What experiments? So Tony talked about running experiments in the complex domain. We could call these experiments. What things can we do which support the strategies, which will change the outcomes? Let's say we're going to put some WIP limits in place. Let's start doing retrospectives. We come up with a set of things we might try, and then we can put some more matrices in here, and we can put some dots in place to show the correlations. So now we can have a conversation and we can say, what are we doing to solve this problem? And we've got a number of things we can try. How does that support our strategy? How does it help us deliver these outcomes? And how's that going to get us towards our goals? And the key thing here is not about, like most A3s, it's not about the document itself. It's about the process you go through and the conversations you have to come up with this. So everybody has a nice, single, common, clear understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it, how do we know whether it's working, what does success look like. And I should probably stop there. Just going back to the Lean Kanban North America conference, we're doing a workshop on this. It's only 4 hours because it's not that. Yeah, only 4 days for it.
All right, so I want to give you a thinking tool for that you can use this with, you can use that, you can use other things with. We're going to talk about it. It's called adaptive action. And for those of you who are familiar with retrospectives, in some ways it's going to look very similar to the retrospective framework. But it actually comes from a couple of places. It comes from the Institute for Cultural Affairs in Canada, one path for it. Liberating Structures uses a very similar way of thinking. Esther and I use a very similar way of thinking when we talk about retrospectives. So how many of you, when you do retrospectives, start with doing something to set the stage, get everybody's head in the room, then gather some data, generate some insights, decide what your improvement action is going to be or your experiment is going to be, and then close the retrospective? Anybody familiar with that pattern? Okay. So in that, really the set the stage and the close the retrospective are kind of facilitator wrappers for the meat of it, which is gather data, generate insights, decide what to do, right? So in the Human Systems Dynamics Institute, they have taken this idea and made it go very, very deep. And so they call it what? Which leads to so what? Which leads to now what? In a continuing cycle. So it's a process of inquiry. It's a process of looking at your problem more deeply and setting up your chain of experiments. So in this model, what you do is you start with what? And that isn't the retrospective coherence. It's not looking way back. It's what is the current state? Where do we find ourselves right now? Well, we're a team that's this size. We have this kind of skills in our team. We are looking at things like this. We have a manager who brings us these kinds of problems. We recently tried this and that. You look at all of those things. If you go deeply into some of the complexity theory stuff, you would look at what are the boundaries around things that we're looking at. What are the attractors? Where are the patterns? What kinds of interactions and exchanges are going on? You would describe all of those. You don't have to have that context. You can just look at what's going on right now and get some description of it. Very much like Karl's description of what is the problem, right? What are the problems that we're looking at? So you spend some time here till you feel that you really understand the current state, as much as it could be understood. What is this? What is this problem that keeps reoccurring? And what are the pieces and parts of it, right? Then you take that and you say, well, given that, given what we know about this right here in this moment from our own experience, what does that tell us? What meaning can we make of that? What insights does that give us? What are the implications? If we continue down this route, what might be likely to happen, right? How are the similarities and differences? What are the similarities and differences between what's going on right now and what we would like to have happen, and the outcomes that we want, right? Or the results that we want. How is what we have now the same or different than that, right? So we do some looking at it. We look for the implications that we can discern. We can't know it all. We know we can't know it all. We know whatever we do is going to change things, because this is really good for working in the complex domain, for problems that fall there. So we get some good ideas about the implications, and from that, very similarly to the way what you were talking about, Karl, we may generate a list of a number of tactics, and then we pick one. What is our next experiment? What are we going to try? What's our probe, right? What's our probe? So this is we can do this quickly, we can take a long time with it, but in essence it's coming up with, here's our best speculation about what the probe is. We do that, we make that probe, and then we're right back up here and we say, now what happened? Right? Now that we've done that, this becomes sensing. It really was kind of sensing at the beginning, but we hadn't started the process yet, right? So now we're sensing again. Here we're choosing how we're going to respond. That response is a probe, and we keep that cycle going. It works to help us with these kinds of very complex problems because it's not a one-shot deal. It is that, let's try this, see what we learn, let's try that. It's a learning model. It's an inquiry model. It keeps us in questions and out of answers. And when you have a very complex problem, you want to sit more with the questions. Spend more time with the questions than you want to spend with defining the answers. Because answers stop you. With answers, you stop. Right? And what we want to do is learn. We want to learn more and more about what's going on, about how this problem manifests in all its glory and all its many, right? so that we can keep sending out probes, so that we can keep getting information back for some sensory data, so that we can keep choosing a new experiment in response, right? So the tools that Karl gave you with the X matrix fit into this. What I love about this is, and I hadn't really thought about this when we published the retrospective book. I learned about this later and I was like, oh gosh, it's got all these layers I didn't really understand before. How many here are internal or external coaches in an organization? Or consultants of some flavor? Okay, so a few of you. If you're like me, you have a toolbox of techniques, things you can bring to a situation, knowledge, stuff that's happened at other things that you hopefully learned from, and so on. But then you come into a new client, and you're confronted with, you know, it may look somewhat familiar, but it's a new problem. Because you've never encountered it in this organization before with this group of people and their backgrounds, right? So you open your toolbox, and how do you decide which tool to pull out and use? Right. Well, yeah, now I do. Before, it was gut, right? It was just, this one seemed like it worked pretty well last time, I'll try this one again, right? Now I have a way that says, is this a tool that's going to help me understand better the what? Or help my client understand their what better? Is this a tool that's going to help me more with uncovering the underlying and really understand so what? Is this a tool or a technique that's going to help me choose a step? You know, pick from among the select possible ones we could go forward with. How do we choose? Well, will this tool help me do that? Right? So now I have something that gives me more guidance around that. And if I put that together with a Cynefin framework, which tells me what kind of a problem are we even talking about here? Is this an obvious problem? Is this a complicated problem? Right? And I apply this, and maybe I've used my X matrix up here and here, right? These things all working together help us as people who help know what thing to use. It gives us a grounded theory base to make those choices with. And that has been enormously useful to me. I have been consulting, and no one here dare do the math, but I started my consulting career in 1988. And it has really only been the last 6 or 8 years that I have had these kind of tools to really not have to just go on my intuition. I have really good intuition, but it isn't really sufficient, right? So, adaptive action, whoops, adaptive action.
Okay, any questions? I think we've got a couple of questions.
Yes.
So your first, what is more of a symptom? I'm trying to understand where is your root cause. Is it in so what or now what? Where is the root cause lies? What is your symptom? Okay, what is the problem? That's a symptom, right?
Well, so, you know, you've got a problem. You're not getting some results you want, right? Right? You decided if it's here, you probably can find a root cause. What was wrong with that guy? That guy who wanted to keep the pen in the air but opened his hand and let it fall to the floor anyway, right? There's some kind of cause there. Oh, he opened his hand, right? But when we get into the complex domain, there is no one root cause. There are multiple root causes. And even people now who are teaching tools like the 5 whys and those that were traditionally intended to be, how are we going to drill down and find the one thing? That works great over here in this ordered world. It doesn't work so well over here in complexity and chaos. And even those folks who are teaching, I just ran across this the other day, somebody teaching the 5 whys technique that started up here with the first why and then began branching, right? Because there were multiple factors and it was all retrospective coherence, right? It was all, oh, well, we're gonna take one of those and blame that thing. But in fact, it was a complex group of things that were interacting that if any one of them hadn't happened, we definitely wouldn't have gotten the same outcome, okay? So it's not about root causes when you get into that complex domain. It's only about root causes when you're over here in the order. I know that's not good.
So have you ever gonna have closure to complex issue? Like if it happens next time, it's again totally brand new issue? Or is there anything you can carry forward from the last complex issue?
So that is an indicator to you. If you have a problem, we were just saying a few minutes ago, if you have a problem, you get the experts in, they tell you what to do, you do all those things rigorously, exactly like they tell you, it stops being that way for a little while, and then all of a sudden it's squirted up over here, right? And so you might try that strategy again, and then pretty soon it's showing up in this team over here. When that happens, you know you have a complex problem. That it is not solvable through those kind of expert means, those total quality tools. A lot of them, they work really well in manufacturing, where if you don't screw the bolt on tight enough, you can figure out that that's what made the wheel fall off, right? But in human system problems, team problems, organizational problems, that's really hard to pin down. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
So he asked if you can ever really get to a solution in a complex problem. If the world, yeah, if the, you know. Every time you go through this, the world changes. Yeah, so during which sprint do you stop doing your retrospectives?
So one of the things
There you go.
is you find in kinetic, and in the complex space, you might be running experiments, and you want to run multiple ones at the same time. You've got to be exploring the whole space. You might find some of them, you go, hang on, that one's repeated. Hang on, we're running it over there, it's the same happening. Ah, okay, we're now learning enough about the system to go, this one, we talk about dynamics. We're exploring complex, run the experiments, hey, we're getting somewhere here. Now we take it across into complicated, we'll make a process. Right. You've got to be careful for that part of the problem. Over time, you want to take it back again, because at some point, this is going to change as well. The one thing you don't do is drag it down to obvious, unless you are convinced that the only part of that system that problem changes is on a geological time span. Otherwise, you get complacent and you're at risk of complacency.
So Tony, can you then say, in a complicated world, we can utilize processes to address the issues. In a complex world, utilize approaches, frameworks, whatnot, to address the issues.
In a complex world, you're dealing with an ecosystem. So in a complicated, you can take engineering approaches. If we get this right, we'll be able to repeat it. In a complex, you're dealing with an ecosystem where you're forever shifting and things will move. You want to build elements in the system. You're always monitoring, you're always watching for the threats, but you will see patterns start to emerge that you can start to stabilize.
So the machine metaphor falls down when you get to complex world.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And so there's all sorts of things. You know, my background when I was at IBM with communications and things like that, it was always, have you planned? Did you implement the plan? You didn't, you know, the press wrote something different than they were supposed to write. Yeah, it's a kind of complex issue. You know, change culture is a big complex issue. Funny enough, if I go out and tell people, here are new principles, and we make sure everybody's been told them, and everyone's been communicated that properly, and they've been checked on that, we test them, is that going to change in their behavior? Not so much. People don't really succumb to engineering metaphors.
And, you know, about 20 years ago, a guy named Peter Vail wrote a book that the title was Permanent Whitewater. So the idea of this ever ending is from another century, probably 2 centuries ago, actually. We are learners now. That's awesome. And that means, even at our organizational levels, as organizations learn, we're constantly changing. Because the minute you learn something new, you're not the same person anymore. You can't go back, right?
Can I throw one more thing?
Yeah.
What you tend to see in a lot of organizations is managers and people who rise up the chain perceive more order than is the case. They think things are complicated. I did a project very quickly. A couple of years ago, European Commission IT director. Okay, we did the Quinlan framework. We did some work with that. We had users, we had all sorts of people taking examples of problems and they placed it. Okay, I also had the director general and his exec team doing the same problems, same framework, placed them. He went around, looked at everybody else, and he came around halfway through going, I've just realized I've made a fundamental mistake for 2 years now. He and his team put all the problems in complicated and a few things down in obvious, one thing in complex. Everybody else who's dealing with users is putting everything in complex, going, these are messes. There are a handful of things over here, but only a handful. If you're a leader, you generally think the world is better because I've worked my way up and I understand how it works. You also get the information given to you is filtered. So all the difficult stuff gets taken out because he's not smart enough to deal with that on Monday morning.
So cognitive edge for Quinlan, more on Quinlan. There's lots of articles and methods and all kinds of stuff there. For adaptive action, the HSD Institute, that's the URL, Human Systems Dynamics, hsdinstitute.org. Where can they find more about X-Matrix?
The X-Matrix Bible, I guess, is a book called Hoshin and Read for the Lean Enterprise. Maybe I'll put it on a flip chart.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are all tools for problem solving.
So a couple of weeks, well, it's about 2 months ago now, I was in a meeting with some managers, and one of them in the group was really having difficulty with the notion of continuous improvement and focusing on problem solving. And I could hear the appeal in his voice. He was really like, well, when will things get stable? When can we stop talking about continuous improvement, and when will we have done enough? When can we just get on with it? And great guy, but he was really struggling with that concept of why do we have to continually focus on this? And we used to talk about being robust in the face of change. In other words, we can withstand change, and that was seen as a good thing. But it's not really enough anymore. Then we started talking about being resilient in the face of change. We can roll with the changes. We can acknowledge we're in complex environments, and that's good. We can deal with the change and roll with it, and do experiments and deal with it. But taking that a step further, back to the anti-fragility stuff that I was referring to earlier, how can we think about the changes and challenges that we're facing in our organizations and environments and use them not just to roll with them, but actually to help make us stronger? And that's where we experiment with the concept of problem-solving teams. Not with the goal of just solving the immediate problem so we can roll with the changes, but how can we use that process to actually come out the other side with a stronger team and a stronger organization than we went in with. So all of these tools have very practical applications, as I said earlier. So we use the Quinlan framework. We have problem-solving teams. Not all of those problems are in the complex domain. They don't all need experiments, but for those that do, experimentation is a very valid and very useful approach. Having an X-matrix that serves essentially as a portfolio that maps our strategies and initiatives to a sequence of experiments that we want to try out with defined results is a very useful way to try and capture this stuff and make some sense of it. Not just for leadership teams, but for teams across the organization that engage in this sort of problem-solving activity. So Diana, you summarized the tools, but we have the tools from the X-matrix and the Hoshin Kanri stuff. We have the Quinlan framework. And we have experimentation. We have the stuff from the Human Systems Dynamics Institute and the Adaptive Action Cycle. We have some other stuff around containers, differences, and exchanges. which is a really useful way of conceptualizing and thinking about your organization so you can figure out where to start making some interventions and changes. But all of these, as I said, very practical tools for applying principles from complexity science to help build stronger organizations, or not just more resilient, but anti-fragile organizations. So I want to just be respectful of your time and just stop there and see if Stacey, if we have time for Q&A, or if you want to move on with some other stuff.
Yeah, why don't we leave it up to you guys. Do you want to spend 5 minutes on Q&A? Thumbs up if we're good, or no? Thumbs up if you're good?
Just say full.
If you're not, all right. So we'll just spend 5 minutes. We'll time box it. So who's got a question? Let's go ahead and chat it out.
Yeah, one over there.
So,
Go ahead up over there.
so I was thinking a lot about complex problems. I come from a background of working in development economics, and we talk a lot about empowerment. And right now, I'm work a lot with and I want them to, rather than ask me for solutions until the problem is complicated, where they want me to give them step-by-step kind of instructions, and the second something goes wrong, they stop. I want them to feel empowered to approach those problems in a complex way, but every time I try to drive change, drive this thought process, they see it as a punitive. And so I just wondering if you guys have any advice on how to empower people to feel comfortable with complex.
I can't hear her.
Can you repeat the question?
Well, she spent 15 minutes. But so what's the right?
So I'll try and summarize your question. Okay, tell me if I miss some details. So the context is you've got some offshore teams that you work with. They've got some problems they need to deal with. They want to approach those problems as if they're complicated problems, and they look to you for a lot of guidance on how to solve those problems. You want to empower them more to recognize they are actually dealing with complex problems and empower them to go solve those problems, but they view that approach as punitive, was the word they used. So then the question back was, do we have any advice on dealing with that scenario? Is that a fair summary?
Right, just how to help people feel empowered that complex is something to be scared of.
Yeah, how to help people feel empowered that complex isn't something to be scared of.
So I have a colleague named Chris Corrigan, who is very, very wise in the world way of teams. And he says, you know, everything you do for your team is one less thing they can learn to do for themselves. So that's a kind of a guiding piece for me. I think about that a lot. It's like, where am I doing too much? Where do I step back? And those kinds of things. So in some ways, what your question reminds me of is it might be a time for a shallow dive into chaos for them. So I'm curious what you think about something like that.
So I was going to talk a little bit about kind of mentoring and working with so walking them through the problem solving process, and there's some tools that we haven't talked about. So there's 8 more generic problem solving 8 3s, which talk you through the process of understanding the problem, doing some form of root cause condition analysis, looking together to put what plans, what experiments might you try, why you're doing them, how you're going to know. So some of the things we've talked about, again, doing it on an A3 piece of paper, and once they've got the format, they can take that away, they can put it in, they can bring it back to you, you can talk through. So you're still guiding them, you're still holding their hand, but you're giving them the confidence to go off and do it. And they're understanding the background behind why you're suggesting changes.
It helps to have a conversation with your team and be explicit about the sort of atmosphere or culture that you want to have together. Do you value experimentation? You see, Tony mentioned this concept of safe to fail experiments. That's really important. if this experiment fails, nobody's going to lose their job or lose their bonus, or the product's not going to fail, we're not going to lose a customer. So when we talk about experimentation, we're not talking about risky, reckless risk-taking. We're talking about deliberate, intentional experimentation, where we know roughly what the outcome is that we want to achieve, and we're setting on a path of deliberate learning to get there. But we're doing that together. Maybe that's part of the message to your team, is that you're not just throwing it to them. It's something that you're working together with them, and it is safe if they fail on the experiment.
I think there's another couple of things. So one is it's a complex issue, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And a complex issue in its own right means you've got to try a number of safe to fail experiments yourself to get them to shift. One of the other things is, when you get deep into the theory of complexity, I speak as someone who skims the surface, I water ski across the Arctic. We talk about things like attractors and boundaries and identities. So what do they see themselves as? Are they implementers or are they something different? And we all have multiple identities we bring to every role we play. Okay? And that shifts depending on who we're talking to, the context of what we're looking at. So there might be certain places where they take more action themselves. So start to explore where those places are, put them in those situations and work out how you stretch the edges. It might be that there are certain patterns of behavior we fall into, call them attractors. So how do you catalyze a new attractor? So you stimulate some behavior. So you start small, you start really small. You don't want to deal with big things, but actually, okay, so at a trivial level, what time should we really talk? And wait, hold back. Actually, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you what time we're going to talk. You can nominate it. Sorry, my language is going to switch sooner or later. Believe me, it could have been far, far worse. It has been most of today. There are boundaries, so you need to establish some boundaries of, okay, when you guys hit this point, I shut up. You're on your own. Things like that are how you start to play with it. And you'll have to try lots of different things. Some of them will work, some of them won't. None of them will break the team, probably. The sledgehammers might, so you might want to hold that back, and if you really get no responses, then you throw the sledgehammers in. But that would be extreme. Try lots of things. See where you can nudge them in those directions.
So with that, I apologize. We have to cut it because we've maxed out our time. So first, thank you, Ken, for setting this all up and for helping construct just a phenomenal space tonight that I personally didn't expect to have this kind of power behind you. You guys are like the Agile Avengers, right? So Diana Larsen, thank you for coming out. Karl Scotland, thanks for your bit on the A3 and kind of thinking through that. I think I tweeted some things out of the A3. One of the things that you said is it's not about the piece of paper, it's a process and the communication, and that just kind of hit home for me. So thank you for sharing that. And for Tony Quinlan, thanks for your bit on the Kniffen. That was phenomenal. That was phenomenal, and I tweeted that out. If you guys get a chance, I'm sure you're taking a look at the ladies from Remarker. Kata's already put some stuff up there. If you study that, take pictures of it, the bit about the Kniffen piece is up there. It looks phenomenal, and I'd recommend you take some pictures of that. Please tweet out a thank you to those guys. It's just it'd be a great favor. One thing I do want to thank, Tom Williams, who was here earlier and he took off, but he kind of made this thing happen for us. And where's Carlo? Carlo, this is great. What can we? Great having you. Thank you, thank you, thank you from all of us. So. So we're going to have those tools that you guys talked about. If you could just draw them up here and or write them up there, and that way we can get them down and we'll post it on the meetup site tonight. I think we have a few minutes to network, so feel free to stick around a little bit, get to know each other, take some pictures of the posters here. If we don't have this posted tonight, but if you're looking for a job or you've got a job available, what we might do is just put it up here. So just write down looking, or if you've got something that needs filled.
We use Brown.
Oh, and if you need recycle, there's recycling behind the wall. Oh, one last thing before the last thing. There's this book, Agile Retrospectives, and where's Laura? Where's Laura? Did she leave? Is she here, the one who asked the question? Oh, you guys here? Laura, this is for you for having the courage to ask the first question and a real deep question after that. Thank you, Laura.
Good job. Did you organize for me?
I just helped. Excellent. It was good. Oh, this was phenomenal. This is very good on my.